Migrants are not only being forced out of New York City shelters, they're being arrested too. Several well-publicized instances of violence by migrants in New York have alarmed some city officials, although police records do not indicate an increase in crime. The New York Police Department has highlighted shocking incidents involving young men residing in the city's immigration shelters during the last month. Some of these instances involve migrants getting into trouble with the local authorities. According to authorities, a 15-year-old teenager shot an officer in Times Square and struck a tourist. 2 officers were kicked and punched on West 42nd Street. A Venezuelan guy led a gang that stole handbags and cell phones from more than 60 people, the majority of whom were women walking alone. Last week, during an early morning police raid in the Bronx, Mayor Eric Adams accompanied authorities in arresting 5 suspects accused of the robbery spree, dressed in a bulletproof vest and a Fendi scarf. A migrant crime wave is washing over our city, Police Commissioner Edward Caban told reporters some hours later. Some of the incidents were caught on film and have since gone viral, prompting Republicans in power and allies to claim that migrant criminals are besieging New York. Quantifying crimes committed by migrants is extremely impossible because police are not permitted to inquire about a suspect's immigration status, according to Kenneth Corey, a former chief of the department who retired in 2022. However, police data show that there has been no increase in crime since April 2022, when Texas Governor Greg Abbott began sending buses of migrants to New York to protest the federal government's border policy. Since then, over 170,000 migrants have landed in the city, and it is unclear what crime figures would have looked like if they hadn't arrived. However, as migrant numbers have increased, the overall crime rate has remained stable. Indeed, a review of the New York Police Department's month-by-month statistics since April 2022 shows that many major categories of crime, including rape, murder, and gunshots, have dropped. This means that the crime rate, or the crimes being committed, mostly don't have much to do with the migrants. The number of robberies per month has fluctuated since huge numbers of migrants began entering. It peaked at 1,730 in July 2022, fell to 1,155 in February 2023, and then rose to 1,417 last month. This could be attributed to normal crime waves that occur in any society. According to Jeffrey Butts, head of the Research and Evaluation Center at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, there has been no noticeable migrant crime wave. I would interpret a wave to mean something significant, meaningful, and a departure from the norm, he went on to say. So far, what we have are individual incidents of crime. Still, immigrants in shelters reported feelings of animosity recently. They claimed that in subway cars, people scoot over to avoid sitting too near to them or making unpleasant remarks under their breath. They say things in English you don't understand, but you can tell it's bad. Ezequiel Velasquez, a 22-year-old Venezuelan, said in Spanish outside the Row NYC hotel in Times Square, where a migrant shelter has been set up. Because of the recent crimes, he claims, people regard all migrants as violent. Marcela Lopez, a 38-year-old Colombian migrant, said that days after the officers had been assaulted in Times Square, a man stood in front of Row NYC and hurled insults. She couldn't understand him, so her 11-year-old son translated. "Immigrant bastard," the man had remarked. The police did not provide numbers to support Commissioner Caban's claim of a migrant crime wave, instead referring queries to a February 5th news conference in which police officials revealed the Bronx raid and named various other offenses likely committed by migrants. Officials at the news conference highlighted an increase in robberies by men on mopeds, which are a mode of transportation and work for many immigrants since migrants began to arrive. They also mentioned calls to shelters about domestic abuse, pickpocketing, stealing, and human trafficking. The chief of police, Joseph Kenney, stated that mopeds were employed in 32 different robbery patterns in the first 5 weeks of the year. He stated that only one such pattern occurred over the same period last year. The police claim they have also been looking into groups of Venezuelan immigrants who they believe are involved in more sophisticated thefts, such as hacking into stolen phones and using people's IDs to empty their bank accounts. It is not surprising that criminals or criminal behavior would emerge among a sudden inflow of tens of thousands of people, according to James Essig, the department's former chief of detectives. Any group that comes in where you've got unemployed young males hanging out in the corners, they're going to get themselves into trouble, he went on to say. Mr. Corey, the former department chief, stated that even a few immigrants engaging in illegal behavior might lead to an increase in crime and a decreased sense of security. The bigger question is why we would allow people who are clearly engaged in criminal activity, and we're not talking about a young mother who is shoplifting baby formula to feed her baby, why would we allow them to remain here, Mr. Corey stated. Some politicians have proposed eliminating a local rule that prohibits police officers from honoring detention requests given by immigration authorities without a federal judge's warrant. When portraying crimes committed by migrants, officials have mostly relied on widely publicized videos. During the February news conference, officials showed a woman being pulled by a thief on a moped. Following the assault on 2 police officers in Times Square late last month, the department published a brief video of the incident, which resulted in the indictment of approximately half a dozen men. The Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, eventually released longer footage of the attack, which revealed that the policeman had started the confrontation, forcing the men to keep walking before dragging one of them to the side when he appeared to hurl an insult at the police. The fight started when the man resisted. The immigrants are not necessarily the ones causing the crime wave. They are being outcasted and are on the receiving end of biased treatment from the local authorities. According to Ana Maria Archila, co-director of the Working Families Party, which is affiliated with labor unions and community organizations, focusing on certain crimes has generated a false sense of instability and danger, posing a threat to law-abiding immigrants. She mentioned the Guardian Angel's assault on a man on February 6th that the anti-crime group mistook for a Venezuelan immigrant. The attack occurred right as the group's leader, Curtis Sliwa, was being interviewed live by a news channel nearby. You look at the history of immigration, and you see clearly that waves of migration are accompanied by diminishing rates of crime, she added. It's also true that waves of migration have been received with racist, xenophobic rhetoric. In 2023, Stanford University researchers discovered that foreigners were imprisoned at a lesser rate than Americans. In 2020, a Princeton University study found that illegal immigrants in Texas had fewer criminal arrests than legal residents. Mayor Adams, who warned in September that the immigration crisis would destroy New York City, has now moderated his tone. Any New Yorker that looks at those who are trying to fulfill their next step in the American dream as being criminals, that is wrong, he told reporters the day of the Bronx raid. That is not what we're seeing. Manhattan has announced an 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew for migrant shelters, aiming to align policies with those of traditional homeless shelters. The curfew will allow for more efficient capacity management. The decision has nothing to do with the recent spate of crimes. In Manhattan's East Village, migrants waited outside St. Bridget's School, a former Catholic school where temporary housing assignments were handed out. A 32-year-old immigrated from Venezuela to New York 10 months ago and reported a moped theft in the Bronx. He felt safer in New York than in Venezuela, where he was arrested for expressing anti-government opinions. The recent shooting by a 15-year-old in Times Square is causing dread for many migrants who are coming for a good life. How do you think this situation should be resolved? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so we can keep you updated on the current situation.